Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates. I am Wile, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down one of our favorite shows, Stranger Things Season 4. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? Make sure you stay tuned all the way until the end to hear all about our 125K subscriber giveaway. So guys, I love Stranger Things, and I was actually a little bit late to it. The only reason I started watching it, to be honest with you, is because my husband worked on seasons 3 and 4. Look for his name in the credits right here. And I had to catch up, and once I started watching, I started asking myself why I hadn't started watching earlier. I always feel that the undertones of the show are really good, and you can always walk away learning important lessons. I think this season in particular really brought in a good focus on mental health. We even see some of the characters in counseling. If I was gonna have a season where I was gonna break it down, this was the one. I'm gonna be going through questions all about mental health with season 4 of Stranger Things. Let's jump right in. Spoiler warning, if you haven't finished all of Stranger Things season 4, and that does include episodes 8 and 9 that just came out this past weekend, make sure you're caught up before you watch this video if you care about spoilers. When it comes to Max, I think one of the biggest questions that I got is, why is she not opening up to her friends? And when you're the person on the outside looking in, it doesn't make any sense, right? You're like, ugh, you're frustrating them, you're making things harder on yourself. But what I hear from a lot of my clients is that they are so worried about being a burden to their friends. They have experienced it where they may feel like they're sharing, they're oversharing. They may have seen friends or family members become depressed as a result of hearing someone else's bad news, and they just learned it's more selfless to just keep things to yourself. So I believe Max is trying to protect her friends from what she believes about herself, which is that she is inherently bad, or she will bring bad or evil into people's lives. And she's trying to shield the people she loves from that, keeping it to herself in one way, a form of protection for her friends. But in another way, she's also shielding her own guilt, right? I think a lot of times when we're dealing with mental health struggles, especially in her case, she's dealing specifically with grief. When you're dealing with grief, the thing that can complicate it is that it's not always as simple as, I'm sad a person passed away. A lot of times grief is mixed in with anger, mixed in with guilt, it's mixed in with shame and embarrassment. Grief can take on so many different forms, and we don't always feel comfortable talking about it, because then we start feeling guilty about how those other emotions are making us sound or look. And so another reason that I don't think she's sharing what's happening is because she is afraid of how she'll be perceived if people really knew how she felt, because there might be elements to our pain that we're actually very ashamed to admit. I think that Lucas does a really great job here trying to show Max that he's gonna be there for her no matter what. When you're that friend or family member or partner who is seeing someone that you love and care about drowning in misery, you can tell they're not the same. It's really hard to just sit back and watch that happen. And sometimes we take it personally, right? You ask yourself, why am I being kept on the outside? I think the way that Lucas is handling this is actually what I would recommend, which is basically keeping the door open. You know, he doesn't push her too hard from my perspective. I feel that he basically just keeps asking her, what's going on? How can I help? You know, you can always talk to me. So I think that he was at a point where he knew that it would probably help her if she was to reach out to him, but he could also tell she was really struggling with it. So if you're in that position, my recommendation to you is don't give up on them. Sometimes you start taking it personally and you don't want to continue to feel rejected when you're just trying to help, but recognize that most of the time it has nothing to do with you. And whatever it is, it's probably like those two things we talked about. Either they don't want to be a burden on you, or they feel a certain element of embarrassment or guilt or shame about what they would need to share. If you could communicate in some way to them, you are never a burden to me. I come to you when I'm in need. You come to me when you're in need. The more you can reiterate that message, I think the higher likelihood that they'll let those guards down and come to you for what they're needing. So watching that first counseling session with Max and the counselor, it's like painful to watch, right? Like you feel for the counselor and you also feel for Max because there's obviously a disconnect happening there. The thing that every therapist watching that scene is gonna see is they're gonna be reminded of usually a teenage client that they have worked with that was very similar to Max. When you're a teenager, a lot of times you're still at the age where like you don't fully trust adults, right? You've been burned by adults before, but at the same time, you don't identify as a kid. You have certain things that you want to keep private. You have your own goals and world. So it is a very hard balance to navigate. And I think the counselor did her best. She's in a more difficult position than someone like me would be in because, for example, her being a school counselor, she has access to Max's grades, right? She's familiar with what regular grades look like for Max. She has to ask about that, right? Her job is to help kids be successful in school, and she's trying to help them deal with whatever mental health stressors might be impeding their success in school. Me, as a regular psychotherapist, I wouldn't have to ask, why are you failing these classes, right? I would just ask, how's school coming along? Are you stressed about it? How do you feel about the summer? You have to focus on asking open-ended questions, especially with teenagers. And I've actually found that self-disclosure with my teenage population is really the best way that I can establish trust. So instead of asking, ooh, you're getting some B's and C's, that's not regular for you, I would say something along the lines of like, I remember in school being at a point where I didn't care. The difference between an A, B, C didn't matter to me. I started questioning like, why is school so important? When the kids hear that, they're kind of like, yeah, exactly. I don't even want to go to college, or, my parents are putting all this pressure on me. Meanwhile, they're ignoring my mental health, and that kind of gets them to open up. But all of us have been in that position where you're working with the client that's giving you yes and no answers no matter what question you ask. And, sometimes this counselor was asking good, open-ended questions where you can't answer with yes or no. And Max was still finding a way to give a short, clipped answer. I think the counselor was doing the best that she could. However, I did notice sometimes with her inflection, it could come off sometimes as accusatory. Like you're getting B's and C's, or has to be hard on you too, right? When you're making those kind of assumptions instead of just saying, in what ways have you been affected by your brother's death? Or ask, how are you trying to support your mom right now? And do you feel like it's working? That way, you're inviting her to talk more. You could see when she's talking about her mom, she's more comfortable sharing, what she's got going on. But then when it comes back to her, she's like, I'm fine. So sometimes you can pick up on that and allow them to keep talking about that other person until eventually it works its way back around to them. And a lot of times they're speaking in code about their experience. Like she says her mom hates the new house, and then she's like, yeah, well, it's terrible. And then I might say, oh, what's terrible about it, right? So instead of focusing on your own agenda, which the counselor's clear agenda was to understand if Max was still having PTSD symptoms and also to figure out how it's impacting her grades. Instead, you're able to focus on what they want to talk about. She says the house is terrible, and you follow up with, oh, really? Ooh, what's terrible about it? Leading where they're willing to take you, I think, is a great tactic when working with clients that could be perceived as resistant, even though a lot of modalities would say there's no such thing as a resistant client. I don't necessarily agree with that, but a lot of modalities will say that, the client's not resistant. They're communicating something to you no matter what they're saying or not saying. So there are ways to kind of continue building that trust so that she won't feel like every time she comes to counseling, it's an interrogation. So when it comes to Jonathan and Nancy, this is that classic relationship faux pas where nobody's communicating, everybody's keeping something from the other. Us as the audience, we're so frustrated, like, what the heck is going on? And I think this is something, unfortunately, that is super common. I mean, it's one of the things that when I'm working with a couple, we're working through the most. And I don't care if the couple's been together for 6 months or 30 years. This is something that we have to address, which is us thinking that keeping certain information from our partner is for their own good. From my perspective with Jonathan and Nancy, especially on Jonathan's part, he is trying to do what he believes is going to help her best. And I see this with couples all the time. Basically, they think they know what's good for their other partner. They don't want to allow their partner the opportunity to make their own choices based on all the information. So him not getting into the school that they were going to go to together could have been an opportunity for him to let her know that information and see what she wants to do with it. For all he knows, she might be like, hey, this is my dream school. I'm still going to go there. Or she might say, you know, I want to be with you. I'm going to go to the school that you're going to. Whenever we try to assume what our partner is going to want or need, that's really a cognitive distortion called mind reading. And so a lot of times I'm working with couples simply to get them to actually listen to each other, because they both believe that they already know what the other person is going to say or what they want, you know, and when you do that, you really cut off the possibility of getting to learn and know more about your partner. We have to trust them to make decisions that they believe will be best for them, as well as what they believe will help serve their relationship. So Jonathan not sharing with Nancy that he didn't get into the school they talked about going to is really him not trusting her to make decisions for her own life. So watching Elle and Dr. Brenner on screen, it's so triggering for me just to watch the way that he has been able to successfully manipulate her for years. He really shows so many signs of narcissism. The fact that he truly believes that this vanity project of his is for the good of the people that he's imprisoning is honestly wild, but something that we definitely see, you know, all the time, is that when a person can only see through this narcissistic lens, they always feel that their ultimate goals are going to benefit everyone around, when really most of the time everybody around them is suffering and they don't see the problem. Those certain interactions, like that moment where he's telling her that it was her fault, he's gaslighting her. She finally has this moment where she recognizes, you're the monster. And we can have debate about that. If you guys don't feel that Brenner is the monster, let me know in the comments. I do absolutely believe that he is. But when Elle finally has that moment of clarity where she realizes, like, you are the person who created this mess, and he turns it on her, you can see her struggling for a second, like, wait, no, that's not right, right? She's trying to stand firm in her narrative, and that's exactly what it looks like when you're in a toxic relationship, when you're with someone that's gaslighting you, is that you might feel like on a rational level, I know what I'm saying is right. But that one voice, that person who is telling you, no, what you're saying is wrong, you start to rethink, you start to question yourself. And we see that moment with Elle, and she still chooses to hold firm in her narrative. And so I was really proud of her in that moment, because Elle does all these amazing things with her powers, but I think that was probably one of her strongest moments, when she chose to reject the narrative of her abuser. I think that the reason Elle does not share with Mike what's actually happening since they've moved is because, just like we talked about with Max, she doesn't want to be a burden to him. She doesn't want him to worry about her. She wants him to think that she's living this fun life. And, you know, maybe she also feels a certain element of shame over how much she is being bullied. I think that's another thing when we move into like the bullying conversation, is that a lot of my clients don't want to admit that they're being bullied. They'll describe everything that is clearly bullying and still not feel comfortable using that word for some reason. And so I think that for Elle, she's probably just in a place where she doesn't want him to think of her as, you know, someone to pity or someone that he needs to come and save and rescue yet again. And I think that Mike probably would see more value in what he can bring to the relationship if he could support her through that. But she doesn't want to involve him in her own stress and drama. This is definitely a common thing that we will see throughout the show. Definitely something I see all the time in therapy is we're becoming the martyr. We're going to bear all of the stress, all the pain, and we're going to protect everyone we love from it. But they're in pain too, watching you suffer. So definitely, if you are that person that's keeping things from the people you love because you don't want to be a burden, think if there's anyone in your life that would actually appreciate the opportunity to be included in supporting you. The thing about Mike not saying, I love you, that is something that I know as an audience member is frustrating, because so many of us, if not all of us, have known he's loved 11 since the moment he saw her in the woods, right? The fact that he's not saying it really doesn't make sense. But it does make sense when you factor how scary it can be to literally put everything out there about how you're feeling to someone. Most of the time, I see this manifesting as a result of insecurities. When we feel like we don't bring anything to a relationship, sometimes subconsciously, we try to even the playing field a little bit, right? Because if I tell you how amazing you are, what a value add you are to my life, how much I love you, and then you're sitting there thinking like, yeah, you're right. I do add a lot of value to your life. And what are you doing for me? That's our fear, right? Our fear is that that person will realize that with all the amazingness they're bringing to our lives, we're just not doing the same for them. So Mike is trying to protect himself from hurt and disappointment. And they do talk about that, that it is easier to feel disappointed now than to invest more energy, more time, more faith and trust into the relationship, and then ultimately be disappointed and hurt, right? So we try to self-sabotage in a way that we can prevent ourselves from getting hurt down the road. So Mike not saying I love you does make sense to me. Obviously, it wasn't the best decision, but as a therapist, my goal is to always make sense of the behavior, right? How does this make sense in the context of what this person is experiencing, has experienced, or is afraid of experiencing in the future? And so I definitely think that Mike not saying I love you was his way of holding on to some sort of power, to feel like he's got some sort of safety net if things don't work out with her. Well, at least I never said I love you. To say I love you, to say I need you, to say help me, those things are very vulnerable statements, right? Some people would perceive it as weakness, right? We feel inferior to need someone's help, to need someone's love. But in actuality, to be able to admit those things and be willing to accept hurt that could result from being honest and vulnerable, that's actually the strongest thing that we could do, right? To allow ourselves the opportunity to fully love and be loved is such a great reward. And to be able to risk having to deal with the possible pain, hurt, or rejection with the possibility of actually being able to experience the most emotional intimacy that we could ever experience, that's actually a sign of strength. So make sure that you are checking in with yourself and giving yourself the opportunity to be loved completely by another person. What we see happening with Will, obviously there's a lot going on that has not been fully explored or revealed yet, but I can talk about that moment where we see him shut down after Mike gets there and goes straight for Elle. And that is really something a lot of us experience, which is the fear of rejection and abandonment. You got to think Will and Mike were close friends way before Elle came into the picture. And it's not that Will doesn't love Elle. As we see Mike and Elle's relationship developing, Will is watching like he's losing his best friend, and Elle is a sister to him now, right? So he's losing two people that matter a lot to him. I remember being at a wedding when I was younger, and it was the wedding of two people I was really close to individually. And I was so happy that they found each other, but there was a part of me that was mourning the loss of two relationships at once. Now, the reality was that I didn't end up losing either relationship. And I think that's like what Will is feeling in some ways. Now, we know there's more to the story, again, that has not been confirmed, but I think that what we're seeing with him is a lot of things, particularly a feeling that he's being abandoned by two of the people he loves the most. They're choosing each other over their relationship with him. And that's not fair. It's not realistic, but that's valid. So what he does in that moment is shut down, right? He has this painting he wants to share with Mike, and he doesn't share it. Why? Because the feeling that Mike, let's say if he was apathetic towards it, didn't really carry indifferent, like, oh, okay, it looks cool, man, thanks, and goes back to hugging Elle, or if he doesn't like it, that's gonna hurt so much more than the fact that he painted it and never showed him. So when we start doing that, it's a form of self-sabotage, but it's also a form of protection, because he doesn't want to feel the hurt of evidence that his closest friend doesn't care for him the way that he used to. He talks about not hearing from him throughout the whole school year, and he's just dealing with hurt and questions about what their relationship is going to look like going forward. So in that moment where Will shuts down, he's trying to protect himself from further pain. So seeing Lucas this season, we were expecting to see that cliche narrative where you got the friend who used to be a nerd and now they're popular. And luckily that's not really what happened or unfolded throughout the season. But what's happening with Lucas is he is trying to try on different identities. And that's absolutely normal at his age. You know, if I'm seeing a client and they are in their teens and they're wanting to be an environmentalist some days, and then they're wanting to focus on learning computer engineering one day, and then hyper focuses on learning this different language. Not that those things can't go together, but it's almost like a hyper fixation on trying different identities. At that age, that's what I want, right? I want you to be exploring, figuring out what your beliefs and values are, figuring out what makes you the happiest. It's more concerning when we see that happening like a little later in life, because if you are consistently changing friends, changing partners, changing hobbies, and you're at an age where things should be a little bit more settled, that can be concerning. It might be grounds for some of the personality disorder diagnoses, but sometimes you're just at a stage in life where you're going through an adjustment period and you're recognizing some changes need to be made. But if we're seeing constant change, can't be happy because you're always adjusting to something new, that's where it's concerning a little bit later in life. So what's happening with Lucas, him wanting to play basketball, him wanting to be popular, that is totally normal. I wouldn't be concerned about that as a therapist. I can understand why his friends might question him or feel a little slighted by him. That makes sense as well. You know, that's not surprising. But I think that what Lucas is doing is going to help him. Like he says by the end, he realized by going through that process that a lot of those guys he was looking up to, he doesn't look up to them. He wouldn't have that certainty if he hadn't gone through that experience. I absolutely commend him for wanting to try something new. I wouldn't be concerned about that at all. So I think the biggest reveal was that the same guy who's in Elle's flashbacks is the same guy who's in, I think the guy's name is Victor's flashbacks, and is the same guy who is like the overseer of the Upside Down. And what we saw Elle communicating to him in their big final fight scene is that Papa's dead. I know he did this to you. And anybody who's been watching this season is going to be like, no, because he literally killed his whole entire family way before he was there. And so the question is, does this happen? Like, is this just pure fictionalization, or does this happen? And unfortunately, this can happen. There is a diagnosis called antisocial personality disorder, and it's basically complete disregard for other people. It's the violation of other people's right. You're being deceitful, being manipulative, a lot of times being impulsive, and really genuinely not feeling any remorse. And we always look to see if those behaviors started in childhood or adolescence. At that age, there's a different diagnosis for it, but once you become of age and you're an adult, antisocial personality disorder is the diagnosis that would be most appropriate in the DSM-5. Some of the things we'll look for with children, for example, might be like killing animals and having no remorse. What we saw with Henry is that there was probably no saving him. So Henry, I would definitely diagnose with antisocial personality disorder. If you want me to do a whole video on that diagnosis, let me know. I'm actually thinking about doing some more diagnosis videos since a lot of you like the narcissistic personality disorder video. So if you have a request for any diagnoses videos, let me know. One of the great questions that I got was about my view on how music was used this season, if I think it's realistic that music is that powerful. And I definitely incorporate a lot of music into my work as a therapist, whether it be lyric analysis, so you share with me some songs that really resonate with you, and then we go through the lyrics line by line. You tell me what resonates and why. Whether it's writing songs, I've done that even with my little kids. They can sometimes be so much more forthcoming when they are putting it into a song versus trying to talk to me one-on-one, right? Like how we saw with Max, for example. In interrogation style counseling, sometimes clients will shut down. But sometimes we can incorporate art into it. It makes it feel more organic, and they feel like they can be more open about how they're feeling. Because the thing about art is it's up for interpretation. So I might have a kid that's telling me everything's great, and then I say, okay, let's write a song. And they're writing a song about their father who's passed away, right? And that's what is coming to their mind. And now we're talking about that. I might have clients who might write poetry or write stories, or they might need to write a letter to someone who's hurt them in the past. And it's all about finding that music that is going to give them the freedom to truly open up while they're doing that. You know, I always ask, what kind of music is going to help you through this process? And we can learn so much about our client based on their music taste. Being a kid who grew up in an arts program where music saved me when I'd be in my lowest periods, you know, I would even have a playlist that was designed specifically to help me cry. And so utilizing, incorporating music into work, I think, can actually expedite the work that you're doing in therapy. Maybe you can't articulate how you feel, but there's a song that already put it beautifully into words. Let's use that. So I absolutely, and if you look at the lyrics of the song that Max listens to, those lyrics really do make sense when you think about her facing this uphill battle. And I really appreciated the incorporation of music into this season. It leaves a very powerful message about how it can ground us when we feel like we're losing our grip on reality or on our happiness. One of the most heartwarming and entertaining arcs over this season was the development of Eddie and Dustin's relationship. And I think what really resonated with a lot of us is that they really are quite different, even though they do have some similar interests, like being in the Hellfire Club. You know, one of them is a freshman, I think, and then the other one was supposed to graduate a couple years ago. They have relatively different experiences, but I think it's this mutual respect for each other. And it definitely didn't start out that way. That's what I mean when I say arc, is that, you know, originally you have Eddie, who is serving as this role model for Dustin, right? He is the lead of the Hellfire Club. He's this senior who actually is welcoming freshmen to sit at their lunch table. You know, in a lot of ways, he is the guy that gives Dustin a place and identity in high school. But then I think the beautiful thing is that over time, Eddie starts developing this serious respect for Dustin. You know, he used to look at him and Mike as the bottom of the totem pole. You know, they're the freshmen. You go out and find somebody to replace us. You know, they were so nervous and scared of Eddie. And then they just start developing this mutual respect, because we all know that Dustin has so many skills that are useful, especially in these times of stress and disaster. I think Eddie started noticing that he could lean on him. To me, that was a beautiful example of not making assumptions about who we can and can't learn things from. I work with little kids a lot of times. I'm talking about 5 to 7. And they can teach me so much working with them, just as I'm hoping that I am teaching them skills as well. You never want to shut your mind off to the possibility that you could learn something from someone. And I think that by the end, you know, Dustin was Eddie's closest friend, right? He was the person who believed in him, who it brought everyone to him so that he would have this protection. He helped to hide him. He helped to feed him while he was in hiding. Dustin really showed that he was a loyal friend to Eddie. I'm glad that when Eddie died, he died a hero, and he died knowing that he had a true friend. All I can say about their relationship is that I hope we all have somebody like that in our life that we can trust to be our most authentic self. Eddie was able to admit to Dustin that he always runs away when he's stressed. And in the end, he was able to redeem himself and die in a way that, you know, Dustin could tell his uncle that they had something to be proud of. I think it's just cool when you can recognize that age is not the most important determinant in the value a person can bring to your life. I definitely enjoyed this season. You know, we watched every episode as soon as it came out. I've loved all the seasons, to be honest, but I think this season was the one that I was like, ooh, you know, I'm gonna probably be referencing it with clients. I already have had clients talking to me about it when part 1 came out. So really enjoyed this season. I love when you can have something that's entertaining and also has good themes that we can learn from to help improve our mental health. All in all, I have to say this season for me was 10 out of 10. All right, guys. So if you waited until the end, thank you. Let's talk about this 125K subscriber giveaway. First, let's address the elephant in the room. I never did anything to celebrate having 100K. So first, thank you for getting me to 100,000 subscribers. I love doing this channel, and there are times where I get really busy with clients and I have to take a break from posting. And when that happens, you know, I miss you guys so much. So for those of you who have been sticking around with me, especially those who started out with me, you know, when I was celebrating 100 subscribers, I thank you all so much wherever you have found this channel on its journey. Some of you have even been noticing that we've been putting the plaque in the background for I don't know how many videos now, maybe 2, 3, 4, I don't know. Some of you are like, are you not gonna say anything about hitting 100K? And so I apologize for taking so long, but you guys, honestly, I was so overwhelmed. It's like, wow, I reached a point that I hoped would happen, but you never know if it will. I just get overwhelmed and I didn't even know what to say. So I thank you guys so much for getting me this plaque. Let's keep going. And more importantly, let's get to the giveaway. So what we're going to be doing is I'll be giving $125 away to 4 different subscribers. So that's in celebration of season 4 of Stranger Things. All you have to do to enter is comment below your favorite video from this channel. You can even comment the video that brought you to this channel. Just let me know what video you love on this channel and why, because that's going to help me to continue to make content that you all care about, things that you'll find useful and helpful. Also be sure to include your Instagram handle. The reason I'll need that is so that I can communicate with you and let you know that you've won. And also please make sure that you're following me on Instagram as well. So that's 3 things. Comment your favorite video on the channel. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, and be sure in your comment that you include your Instagram handle so that I can contact you if you've won. The giveaway will end on Wednesday, July 13th at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern, and that is 9 a.m. Pacific time and 11 a.m. Central, okay? So make sure that you get your comment in before that date, and I am so excited to read what videos you guys are loving so that I can make sure I make more of those videos for you. Make sure you look in the description box for the official giveaway rules. I appreciate you guys so much for sticking with me on this journey. We're gonna get to 500K, we're gonna get to 1 million. Just stick with me and let me know what videos to make. Again, my name is Stephanie Steph Anya for short. Of course, I ask that you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, like this video, share it with a friend. Thank you again for watching all the way until the end. You guys have no idea how much that helps me with the YouTube algorithm and everything. So thank you.